It's time for the big Berserker Bifrost battering bombarding beat up build. Is that enough hype for you? This is my endgame build focused on AoE damage, Bifrost damage, and melting through enemies with runic attacks focused on AoE, so let's break it all down. Quick spoiler check for you. This is an endgame build, but I won't be showing any story spoilers, but there will be endgame mini bosses and endgame combat, but there'll be no story stuff in here. So if I've finished the story, you should be fine to watch this video. So let's break this build down, and we'll start with essentially my thought process. So I really like the Berserker set, which I know a lot of people are big fans of, but my issue with the Berserker set is the perk. So when you use a relic, you massively increase the damage of Kratos' melee attacks, but you also increase your damage received. The downside of this is that, you want to be highly aggressive when you activate this and when you activate the relic because of the damage increase that you get. However, at the same token, you will often take damage because of that, because you being highly aggressive and the increased damage that you do take will often get you killed pretty rapidly or take a huge chunk of damage. And so I was tinkering with wearing the full Berserker set and trying out to see if I could figure out a way to mitigate the damage, and it wasn't really working for me. And I also am using, for my relic, I'm using the relic that just increases my melee damage even further, and it also has a really short cooldown, which helps so that you can trigger this effect much more often. So I'm increasing my melee damage by activating a relic. I'm also using the relic that increases my melee damage, so my melee damage is obscenely good when this happens. So I was tinkering with different ways to mitigate damage and find ways to make this work, and what I ended up finding is that Surtr's arms and waistband fit perfectly with this kind of setup. So the perk on these is Kratos takes reduced damage and has increased stagger resistance during his basic attacks and skills. So essentially, when you are triggering this effect with the relic and getting all of that extra damage increase, you're just going to be swinging away, right? So when you are swinging away, if you do get hit, you're going to take 40% reduced damage anyway. So it mitigates the negative effect while also helping me get the attacks off with the extra stagger resistance in those basic attacks and those skills. So they combine really well, and it gets the best of both worlds essentially from them. So if you want to get these armor sets, so the Berserker set comes from the Berserker Grave Souls that you can get. The chest piece that we're using comes from the soul in Midgard. You will have to clear that one there. You can do this during the story as well. It's just a little hard to do, but you could go and do it if you did want to do this early, so you don't have to wait until the end game to get this piece. It's just a difficult fight. And the Surtr set, again, you don't have to wait till the end game to get these. You can get them earlier, and it comes from the final Muspelheim challenges. So you have to combine the different swords to get the different challenge in the center, and then when you clear the center challenge, you will get those pieces. The Muspelheim challenges may take you some time. I'm not going to lie, and some of them are really challenging, and if you are struggling with them, there is absolutely no shame in just reducing the difficulty. I won't tell anyone if you don't. So for the challenges, I run Lunda's set, so when you get the poison effect applied, it reduces their level, and you do heaps of melee damage. So that's kind of how I managed to get through those challenges to get the gear that I wanted. Now let's talk about the pièce de résistance, the thing that makes this build just that little bit elevated and a bit further, and that comes from the amulet itself. So with the amulet, you want to set up two perks that are based around just increasing your melee damage. So that could be the Muspelheim set, the Niflheim set, or the Vanaheim set. I have tinkered with Vanaheim and Muspelheim and switching those two around, but always keep the Niflheim set as it works the best. The remaining 3 slots, I found it's better to actually use some of these enchantments that are just giving you additional perks. I'm using the one that gives you a constant health regen, as this build is pretty offensive focused. A little bit of health regen isn't bad. It also really helps with the Niflheim set, because when your health's above 75, you get an extra melee damage. So it helps you keep within that threshold. And the crest of the Desperation Heroics, so when your health drops below that critical barrier, you get an invincibility barrier and a buff to your strength, so you can keep alive for a little bit longer, though you could absolutely swap that for the increased melee damage during realm shifts as well. It depends on if you're looking for an offensive fight or a defensive fight. Both of those will work better. But the main enchantment here is the Seal of Runic Storm. So using runic attacks of 3 different weapons in quick succession grants a buff of increased stagger resistance and creates a Storm of Bifrost. This Storm of Bifrost follows you around wherever you go. It's just an AoE around you that applies Bifrost to literally everything in its radius. Now the stagger resistance is also beneficial, so you can just keep swinging in those attacks as well. And what I'm really using this for is for my runic attacks for my weapons. I'll get off the quick, the light runic attack for all of the weapons, trigger this effect, and then slam down with heavy AoE runic attacks on the axe, the Mists of Helheim, because what you do is it creates another AoE on that central area, and you can keep swinging while that's actually effect is still triggering. So the Bifrost effect will then like apply in that area to apply Bifrost to everyone. You can just keep melting them away with your normal attacks, and then use those AoE from these big runic attacks to deal even more damage, or even just trigger your relic and just like attack with your basic attacks to melt through the enemies. So a lot of beneficial and freedom into like how you want to deal with it, whether you're dealing with one enemy or multiple, and how you like choose to tackle those encounters. Some of like the bosses and encounters with lots of like enemies, especially the Muspelheim challenges, you can absolutely melt with this combination. The Seal of Runic Storm comes from another Berserker boss, but this one comes from Svartalfheim. If you go into that area, one of the bosses there will actually drop this for you, so you can put this bad boy on and it will absolutely make the Muspelheim challenges a little bit easier for you. So speaking of those like weapon runic attacks and like general weapon setup, we'll just like touch on them briefly. So for my axe, on the axe attachment, I'm using the Momentous Shift. So when I trigger the Glacial Permafrost, I get a Realm Shift. So combine that with the Amulet attachment, you get that little bit of extra damage. I'm also using Nord's Tempest as my light runic attack because it's a short attack that does decent amount of damage, and the Miss of Helheim, as I think I mentioned earlier, because it does do that massive AoE that I can keep swinging on enemies while the effect is still going. For the blades, I am using Burning Immolation, though I'm probably going to ship this to the Momentous Shift, like the blades version of when you trigger the Permafrost or Immolation, you get that Realm Shift. And for the light runic attack here, I'm using the Flames of Anguish for the same reason. It's a nice short attack. It does apply burn pretty rapidly, as well as the Atlas Eruption. The blades don't really have a like AoE attack that is like set and forget. So this one, like you use and you just like slam the AoE like blades down into the ground. For this spear, the handle here, I'm using a luck-based handle that'll give me a health burst when I kill things with the spear, just for a little bit of survivability in some encounters, especially the Muspelheim challenges. It absolutely does help for that. And for the light runic attack here, I'm using the Thrust of Thousand Soldiers, where you just like stab for days, and the Artillery of the Ancients, which you just throw the spear up and like spears rain down on enemies. And you can actually trigger this effect as some of the spears will lodge in things, and you can use triangle to like explode them like you normally would with those normal attacks. For the shield, I am using the Rond of Nine Realms, so there I have a low luck chance of triggering a Realm Shift when I do parry. So lots of Realm Shift, lots of AoE, lots of damage potential coming from all of these different things. And for like skill mods, which we haven't really touched on, I am mostly focusing on damage with a little bit of elemental and momentum thrown in. Momentum's really good, so you can get like the Realm Shift from your Glacial Permafrost when you do trigger it with the axe, but for the most part, you won't get that too much. If you do trigger that effect, you get that Realm Shift, and then you can pop your relic, you will deal like an insane amount of damage, and you can melt some bosses in that like 5-second Realm Shift window very rapidly. But there's like a lot of potential in combining those things if you do want to go that route. A couple of general tips to like close this out. This build does take a bit to come together, especially getting these pieces is challenging because like these boss fights aren't easy, and you've got to beat these bosses to get them. Now, as mentioned earlier, I did use a Lunda like poison build to get these, and it is really up to you how you want to do that, but I would suggest to focus on the Muspelheim challenges first, as you get a ton of hack silver and like upgrade pieces and all that kind of good stuff from doing those challenges themselves. Plus like the Surtr set is pretty good on its own, even without like using the Berserker's like chest piece, so you could then use that and then go into the grave sites and actually defeat those enemies. Depends on like how challenging you find them anyway, but that's what I found to be like working best for me, the Muspelheim challenges and then going into the grave sites, but it's up to you which kind of direction you want to go in for that. Let me know what you think of this build in the comments down below and what your endgame build is. Thank you for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.